Hey guys, today I've got an awesome guest for you to get to know. It's a very, very world famous, renowned researcher, Professor Zeithaml. She's well known for her works in the field of service industry marketing, how it how it impacted back in the 80s and 90s, her work, her books. It's been tremendous. Anyone who's in marketing knows about this. So she's been working for years as a consultant after publishing her works because so many companies and people saw the value in her works from the first moment on. Of course, she had other people who she worked with, but I'm very, very honored and very glad to be able to present her to you guys. So Professor Zeithaml, I'm very, very thankful that you took the time to be here. Thank you very much. If possible, would you be so kind to tell the viewers for a little bit overview who you are and what your research is about?
My name is Valarie Zeithaml, and you can call me Valerie if that's easier. I have been a student of services marketing for at least 55 years. It began when I worked in a lot of service businesses when I was younger. I was a babysitter and a lifeguard, and I bussed tables at a restaurant and so forth. And so I've thought about service for a long time. Now, one of the things I thought about it was that it wasn't the same as products. So that's why I spent the last 45 years researching service.
May I ask right in there for the first question, what are, in your opinion, the differences between product marketing and service marketing? What is the huge difference there?
Well, the traditional differences we used to talk about were four things. Services are perishable.
Mhm.
For example, if you don't sell airline seats, they're gone.
Okay.
Services are heterogeneous, meaning depending on who you get to cut your hair,
Mhm.
it might work out or it might not. Now,
Yeah.
maybe you don't care so much about that, but I care a lot about it. So
Okay.
heterogeneous, perishable. There are two others, and I'm having trouble remembering them because this goes back a long time.
Yeah.
Will you let me remember them later?
Yeah, okay, no problem. Let's get on. Let's
Okay.
go on. No problem. And it doesn't need to be that technical, just in like in a basic idea for the people who start with the company or who start with marketing. What do you think is important to keep in mind in the difference of services and products? Like what is the big difference? Not on an academic level, but more on a to-do hands-on level.
Okay. Well, first of all, measuring service is very hard. Back in the quality days, it was very easy to measure the quality of physical products. You can get out a scale. This is how much it weighs. You can get out a ruler. This is how tall it is. This is how wide it is. This is how deep it is. But there were no easy measurements of service. That's why you had to measure them perceptually, which is why we developed ServQual. ServQual is a perceptual measure. The second big thing is that delivering service in a company of any size, and the bigger, the harder, is extremely difficult.
There's the question about the ServQual that you developed. It's an important difference, the gap between the customer expectation and the customer experience. What is that gap about?
Okay, first of all, let's say that what is a service that you typically use?
I personally, I would say, for example, let's say business consulting is something that I often do and take into.
Very good example.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone wanted to hire a business consultant, they would have expectations about what that business consultant would deliver.
Yeah.
That means they would think, what should a business consultant offer? What will they offer?
Yeah.
Okay, those are expectations.
Mhm.
Now, when they actually have the experience, those are the perceptions.
Okay.
And very frequently, there's a difference between the perceptions and the expectations.
Yeah. Okay. How should we try to get, or let me ask a different way. What should we as business people do? Should we try to get as close to the expectation as possible, or do we just have to communicate better to say, well, customer, your client, your expectation is just unrealistic? Which of the
No,
two?
no, 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 no. Neither of them.
Neither of them. Okay. Yeah, I'm
Bad,
curious.
bad, bad, bad.
Okay.
First of all, we don't want to promise what we can't deliver.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means, I mean, some people used to say under promise and over deliver. However, I believe that you should only promise what you can deliver. And if you can deliver something, then that's okay to promise it. Now, if somebody comes to you and wants to use your services and you know that you can't deliver what they want, it's important to say, to sit down with them. Okay, still with the consultant. Okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to have a meeting and we're going to find out what you want. And then we're going to talk about how you will measure that. And then we're going to talk about, we're going to get together maybe 4 times in the next year to decide whether we have met your expectations or not.
Okay. So to set up with your client or with the customer or with the one who's offering the service, who can do it both as the one who's offering the service or as the one who's ordering the service, we can say, listen, I want to talk to you. I want to like set a few rules or a few guidelines to see if what we're doing is measuring up to what we discussed at the beginning. Like goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. In 1 month, I want this. In 6 months, I want this. In 1 year, I want this. And then we can see if we are on the path towards these goals or not. Do you understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. How did you get into that field, if I may ask? Like from the very beginning on service quality work research, it sounds like, how did you get into that back in the days?
May I be honest?
Yeah, please be honest.
Probably the most important thing was that I was a lifeguard.
Really?
Okay. Now,
Okay.
I wasn't a Baywatch lifeguard, if you know what that was.
Yeah.
No. I was a lifeguard at a YMCA, and I
Okay.
had a boss. His name was Lou Hammond.
Okay.
He was this big, burly boss.
Okay.
And unfortunately, he didn't tell me exactly what I was supposed to do. I knew
Okay.
I wasn't supposed to let anybody drown.
Yeah.
But beyond that, what was I supposed to do? What did the parents expect of me? What did the little kids expect of me?
Okay.
What did Lou expect of me? So I
Okay.
was sitting there in my lifeguard chair and I was thinking of different things. Okay, the kids probably want me to be nice and funny. The parents want me to respond if they have any questions or concerns. So, do you have any idea what these things are sounding like?
Well, how do you come up with the terms of doing good or bad job on your own? It's like it sounds like bad onboarding of Lou's case. I gotta admit, like usually
Okay, you don't do it on your own. You do it by talking to customers.
okay.
Now, those things that I came up with at that time were just things that I thought of.
Yeah.
As it turns out, they were the precursors to the items on a ServQual measurement scale.
Okay. So interesting approach, because I think naturally for most people they would just think about what they think on their own and then work with what they come up with. Well, I think that service has to have quality XYZ. And you say,
No,
no, no,
no,
no, you
no, no,
gotta go
no.
out and ask the client.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
Bad idea.
Okay.
Bad idea.
Yeah. So if I started my service company, what should I do? What does your research say? Okay, this is one of the first steps. These are the things you should take into consideration.
Well, the first steps I would say is are okay, and this is a bit like any kind of marketing. Who is your target market? And then you want to talk to the people in your target market. Focus group interviews, in-depth interviews. When we came up with ServQual, I did 12 focus group interviews across the country. North, south, east, west. Some with men, some with women. What does service quality mean to you? When you get good service quality, what does it look like? When you get bad service quality, what does it look like? So talk to the customers.
Okay. What is good? What is bad? Okay. I mean, you got just for the viewers who don't know, I'll be linking the works and the papers and ServQual and everything down below in the description of the video, just so you guys know. You can look it up. It's really interesting work. You have a whole schedule of questions and impulses and ideas on what you could start with to get your service product. It's not a product, but your service agency, your service company
Offering.
working better.
Your
Yep, the
service
offering. Thank you very much.
offering.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. And it's really, really interesting because I myself work in marketing as an agency. I witnessed most people, that's why I was so curious to have you on the show, was most people that I know that have an agency or have any kind of offering like videographers, graphic designers, web developers, the whole industry, like goes through that and says, well, I will just come up with what I think the customer wants. I will just come up with that, and those ideas that I have about the client, I will try my best to get the best at that kind of thing. And when I talk to people, because I'm more the guy who goes out, drinks a coffee or a beer with the people, meets with them, talks again and again and again, thousands of times, I made the experience that often what an industry thinks is important or what people are taught is important isn't really important to the client. They look at a completely different set of values that are important to them. And that's a bit how I got into your research and how I stumbled upon your book and everything. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about. Why do you think is that? Why do you think people come up with such different values than what the client really has? I mean, you've been consulting many companies by now. Is there some kind of red tape where I think, oh, that's a common mistake they do?
Okay. Have you ever heard of the GAPS model?
Yep. But what is it for the audience? Yeah, of course, I've read it.
Okay. Well, so one of the big gaps in delivering service quality is assuming that you know. Okay. That's the difference between what customers expect and what companies think customers expect. Now, they assume because it might be easier for them to do that, to make an assumption. But there are lots of examples where assumptions are wrong. For example, do you know the average life of a restaurant, the average lifespan of a new restaurant?
What? A lot of them are closed in the first 3 years, as far as I know, but I don't know the exact numbers.
6 months.
6 months. Wow, that's much shorter than that. Wow. Wow.
Why? Well,
Yeah.
because people say, oh, I really like this kind of, I like to do this kind of food.
Yeah.
My mother cooked this kind of food, and I'm going to have a restaurant like my mother cooked.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know some people are going to like that?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So for the viewers that don't know, the GAPS model is a bit of a way to explain how companies, how product designers, how in development things are assumed on a basis on what the client or the customer might want, and then the product is designed in a specific way with these theoretical assumptions made in place. They're educated guesses. And the issue is sometimes, often, depending on who you ask, it's like the idea of what is wanted is completely wrong compared to what the market really wants. As Professor just mentioned, a very often cited case for restaurants, for example, is the idea that, oh, we'll be doing very big portions for a very low price, and that is going to bring many people in because people like to eat big portions. And virtually all restaurants that tried this approach, for example, failed because they realized, oh, there is a reason why this idea is not common. Often something that is not common has a reason because the market is not really into these ideas. So that's really, really interesting. But as a startup, let's assume I'm a startup, I'm beginning, I don't have the money to like ask a lot of people to do all of this marketing research. I could only work with educated guesses. So with the method you proposed in ServQual, it's like a multidimensional survey. How could I try to implement that with as small a business as possible? Because I always like to try to get my viewers an idea with the smaller startups. If you're a company that gets VC funding with a few $1 million, it's easier to get an agency or to build up an internal department to get these things done. But how could I do it as a bit of a smaller startup?
Okay, you could use ServQual itself, and you could adapt it,
Yeah.
excuse me, to the business that you have.
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you that there are some people who believe and are successful with the idea that they can come up with the right thing. Apple.
Yeah.
Apple is an example.
Hmm.
Apple, the guy who invented Apple, always said, you know, I don't need market research.
Yeah.
However, he didn't use market research on his physical products, but they did use market research in the stores.
Okay.
So, but you can find a lot of adaptations of ServQual that suit different industries. For example, there is a hospitality version of ServQual and a restaurant version. And there are many, many different versions. And to find them, they can look on Google Scholar. Are you familiar with Google Scholar?
Yes, I am. Of course.
So if you go to Google Scholar, you look up ServQual, and underneath ServQual, you will see a lot of different papers listed. They could go through those papers until they find one that fits the industry they're in.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to give the viewers a bit of value, how they can use what you came up with, of course, what others also came up with. It's an evolution taking place over the years, of course. But it's really, really interesting to think about that. So why or how should I say it? It's a bit complicated for me to ask that because it might be a bit out of the boundaries of the questions. I know it's not a specific research you did, but to me the psychological aspect of all of your work is pretty interesting. Like I understand the survey doing, I understand the asking of the clients and to getting the feedback, but I would like to get a bit more of your knowledge, of your experience out of that. I mean, you've been implementing it for years for many companies. You've been hired as a consultant quite often. So could you talk a bit, like, of course, without naming names or anything like that, but like, what are your experiences on the benefits, on what people often make fault, what are the mistakes that people make, and what were some of the benefits that could be applied to business tactics?
Now, what kind of businesses specifically are you interested in?
I'm open to whatever you want to suggest. I'm not really into a specific niche or industry. I think it's it can help to listen to advice or to examples, even if you're not in the same industry. I think the more mental aspect, the framework of realizing that something can be done and what benefit it can lead to is more important than the specific industry someone is in. At least
Okay.
that's been, in my opinion, how I learned a lot of stuff. Because, for example, the NIMBY factory, which is a story of, I think, Toyota and GM, was a very interesting example for me personally on how to educate your own people in your company, because it was such a big example. And so I don't think it's too industry specific. I think you can learn, and often should learn, from industries you're not in, because they
Okay.
apply a lot of interesting tactics that your competition doesn't think of.
Okay. Then let me tell you the next most important thing. Finding out what customers want isn't enough. You have to take that information and build that into your service. And since services aren't manufactured products, what that usually means is you have to build that into the standards that you set in your company to deliver to service quality. I'll give you an example. I worked with IBM for many years on their service quality. And one of the things we found out was that customers felt they would call their rep in IBM and they wouldn't get a response. So we established a standard that the rep had to get back to the customer within 2 days, even if it was just to say, I don't have the answer to what you want yet, but I will have it and I will get back to you. That's a standard. Okay. Federal Express had a standard that was built into what their customers thought was most important. And that was right first time on time. Okay. So that meant it went to the right house on the time that it was promised. And FedEx used to have promises like 8:30 or 12:30. Now, UPS, I think, is better at that now, or Amazon is better at that now. You know, when I order something from Amazon, it tells me, okay, you're going to get it tomorrow between this time and this time. That's a promise. So that's gap 2. Gap 1's finding out what customers want. Gap 2 is setting up standards to have it done. Gap 2 also involves new product or new service design. Meaning, okay, suppose the company is a company that makes invitations for bridal showers. All right. It needs to have a process by which it sets it up so that the design matches what the customer wants. And there's a very important tool for that called blueprinting, service blueprinting. And the customer and the people who deliver it all get together and they make this up together.
I think that's a really interesting take, because you said about something, procedures, operations, and standards. It's a really interesting topic, because if I may ask you, with the service industry, it seems, at least what I experienced with people whom I talked to, with clients that I had and such, there is a huge challenge. When you're small and you offer a service, it's more individual. I offer this service for, like, a barber, or, as you said, bridal showers or this or that, or I'm a consultant, and I can adapt myself to deliver the product in a way that I think is good. So it's like a personal style that I've got or something like that. But once I want to grow, I want to get employees to work for me. A lot of them start to mess it up at that point because they don't have the clear standards, they don't have the clear procedures, and they don't know how to outsource that thing that make them individually successful.
Exactly. And that's gap 3.
Okay.
The difference between the standards you set and what your employees or your franchises deliver.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a wonderful hairdresser. Okay.
Yeah.
She has her own process. The process is, well, it's probably bad to give you this example because it looks like you don't care how your hair gets fixed. Well, let me give you a hotel as an
Okay.
example. Unfortunately, the hotel I'm using as an example just was hurt by the flood. It was
Okay.
in Cedar Key, Florida,
Okay.
but it was run by a small family. And so it knew exactly what its customers wanted because it asked on the phone. When you got there, it did everything just nice. And then the family itself did the delivery. Okay. One place. What happens when you are Marriott Hotels and you have to deliver that across the world? But Marriott has its standards. And actually, one of Marriott's possessions is, oh, what's that wonderful hotel called? High-end hotel. Think. Can you think of it?
I'm not that well versed in that industry, I gotta admit. I know Hyatt,
Okay.
Hilton,
Oh,
I know that Hyatt.
no. It's it won the Malcolm Baldrige Award, but I can't think of the name of it right now. The very best hotel you could possibly think of.
Okay.
And this hotel happens to have just the most wonderful standards.
Okay.
And one of the standards is that the the person that greets the customer
Yeah.
has been told who's coming into the hotel that day and says, hello, Dr. Zeithaml. Please come right in. We've been waiting for you. Go up to the front desk and, they know who you are. When I stayed at this hotel, in fact, they have a system of collecting information about what frequent guests like. And one time I went in there and I always eat oatmeal for breakfast. I ordered room service oatmeal and I said, but I want cinnamon to go with it. Every time I stayed in there afterward, they sent cinnamon up with my oatmeal.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. This is the little special extra thing that makes it so much more appealing to the client or to the customer. It's unbelievable. These little, I think maybe I'm using the wrong word in English, but like these little tricks, this little gadget, this little thing that's not that it's not that expensive to set these things up, but they make a huge upsell for people to experience that. It's unbelievable.
The thing is that they know me.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
You're
Now,
you're
when we
valued
have
as a person, yeah, and recognized.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, these days, there's a lot of trouble with getting
Okay.
help.
Okay.
So even if standards are set,
Mm-hmm.
if you go into a retail store
Yeah.
or you go into a restaurant,
Yeah.
the help is not that helpful.
Okay. Okay.
Are
Isn't
you
that?
Gen, are you Gen Z or a
No,
millennial?
I think I count as millennial. I'm 36.
Mm.
Thank you for thinking I'm
Mm.
that fresh.
You're
Thank
part
you
of the
very much.
problem.
Yeah,
You're part of the problem.
got a problem? And we're
That's
gonna.
part of the problem.
Okay. Please elaborate. Please tell me why is that?
Well, millennials and Gen Z, this is a generalization, but they don't have the respect for clients the way that others did. And I will tell you from my own experience. Okay, I have been a professor for 50 years, and I wrote the book that we used in the course. I wrote the cases that we used in the course. And I wrote most of the articles that were assigned. Now, I wrote a case. One of the cases I wrote was for Carnival cruises. Carnival had a big problem because they had a cruise where the engines, uh, one of the engines died, and people didn't have food. People had to sleep in the aisles and all that. I go into a class to start this discussion, and I cold call somebody first because I want them to start. And I cold call Sam. I don't remember his name, but I cold called Sam. And he said, first of all, this is a terrible case. I found on Google that what they said about this case was wrong, that a lot of people had great meals on this case. So I don't know who wrote it, but it's wrong. I wrote the case. This is my student sitting in there.
Okay.
Okay, not all millennials.
Yeah, of course not. It's like a general. Yeah. I understand. It's something I didn't know it was in America. Like it's pretty much. I'm from Europe. You're from America. I hear a lot of this. The millennials and Gen Z doesn't want to work. It's like a pretty common thing to hear from older people. I personally think it's a difference. It's a big difference because I know I've hired a lot of people. I also know the the difference between hiring someone who's 40 and someone who's 20, and it's generalized as you say, but the identification with work is way different, because
Mm-hmm.
I think the boomer generation is more taking pride in their work. It's more like I gotta do good work. I I identify with the value of work that I created. Well, for many young people, it's not like that.
Right.
I think I don't know if it's like, but I don't know if it's a timing thing because I don't know if the boomers had that when they were 20. You know, it's like who knows if they had. But it's a really weird thing going on right now. And what I personally experienced is manners and politeness. It's a bit hard to get procedures done in that when I go out on meetings, for example, or on events and I meet with people, it's like, hey, you got a startup company. You want your clients, just because I remember right now what I had with a few guys that I met recently. And they were young, they were Gen Z almost, just created the startup and everything. And they were like, oh, yeah, you want to connect with us? Here's our Instagram. And I said, do you have a business card? Oh, no, da da da. And in the English speaking world, you don't have something that we have in German. It's like in English, you just use the word you, both formally and privately. In German, there's two different
Two,
forms. Yeah,
two.
there is du and sie. It's like one is the very polite form of you. It's like you only use it with clients or with people you don't know that you're polite with colleagues, with your boss, and so on. And the other form is the form that you use with family, with friends, with people that you know well. And over the last 20 years or so, because of the American culture influence, it's getting more and more that it's only using the informal way. And now a lot of people that are like 40 or 50 or wearing suits or working in companies are like, I don't want someone to use that informal way of addressing me. While others are like, I don't want to work for companies where I have to use that formal version for my superior. Why should I? He's just above me. He's not more
Exactly.
worth than me as a human. So there's a huge cultural thing going on here that's like very weird in my opinion, because I like to go with the formal, polite way because I just think it's the right thing to do. But I'm fine with the informal way too. But I think it's like, the reason why there are these polite forms and everything. And I'm not, but we'll see how it develops. I don't want to give a moral value on it. Like I don't want to have people screeching at me in the comments and attack me for that.
Oh, I know.
It's my
Well,
personal opinion.
but
I
to tell
like
you
it.
the truth,
Yeah.
boomers, when we were young, we were just glad to have a job.
Really? Okay. Okay.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I had a lot of different jobs when I was in high school and when I was in college, and
Yeah.
I was just grateful.
Okay. Okay. And you think today it's not that way anymore with the younger people?
Well, I do know that young people have certain criteria for a job. Let me be just general about it. And I mean, there's always a bell curve, right? Always a bell curve. Um, but they want meaningful work. They don't want necessarily to work for something they don't believe in. They would rather, well, I shouldn't be generalized about this, but what do you think? Would they rather wear flip flops or high heels?
I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I'm just, and I will put this online. I don't care. I want people to know my thoughts on this. I'll be honest. I'm the child of a migrant family. So I grew up with almost no money. It was 5 children. We were poor, dirt poor, really. And I mean it, like really, really poor. We didn't even have a room for every one of us. It's like poor. And to me, work, I was brought up and I grew up with work is money. You need money to survive. You need a job to survive. That's it. Like a job has to be of value, to be fun or anything. It was like, are you out of your mind? You get money for your lifetime and you work and that's it. And the only thing you can do is make a deal to get as much money as possible for the time you give away. The only thing
Exactly.
there is to consider is don't be an evil person. That was like my mom was like that. Like you gotta be able to look into the mirror. Like don't screw up people. Don't do anything that's malevolent to the people. That's how I was raised. But if you don't do anything malevolent to the people, it's there to make money. That's what you do. You want to buy your children food. You want to pay rent for your children, and so to me it was like a really weird culture shock, even in the same country when I grew up. And I was like then around 18, 20, 25, and I started to get to meet more and more and more middle class people and middle class employees. And suddenly it was like, oh, I want to have value in my work. And I was like, huh? It was like, oh, I'm frustrated because I don't see the value in this work that I do. And I was like, what a value. It's like if my boss pays me to dig a hole and to put the earth into the hole again and to dig it again, if he pays for it, I'll do it. I don't care about the result. I'll do it as good as I can. But it's his job to decide what we got to do. And so it was a real weird culture shock to me to be faced with these kind of people then. And when I started my own businesses, then I started with a few other things, charity organizations, and I had to hire people. It was really like it took me a few years to shift mindset to understand what the problem was for these people.
Mm-hmm.
And in Austria, it's like we've got a way better welfare state than you guys got in America. So it's like you really have to convince someone here to work because they get like 80% of what you get as a wage, you get from welfare for doing nothing. So it's kind of hard to make someone work 40 hours a week if they can get 80% of that for doing
Uh-huh.
nothing. It's really,
So are
really,
you from Austria now?
yep.
I
Born and
love
raised in
Austria.
Austria.
I love Vienna is my favorite city.
Really cool. I'm in Vienna. Well, and my parents are from Eastern Europe. They're down from the Balkans, ex-Yugoslavians. So, in the 90s when there was the war and everything, a completely different way of growing up. It was a completely different way of growing up, going down to meet the family and to have to think about where they bombed, where they killed, was anything destroyed, they need, and you come back here and suddenly people are like, oh, I want to be an artist because I want to express myself. And I recently talked to someone, recently, like 2 years ago, he was a young guy, and he said it ironically, but he was spot on. It was like, if people want a job that has meaning, that isn't work, where they're flexible with time, where they make a lot of money and don't have any responsibility. That's basically it. And it's
Yep.
like, if that is what you want, you're going to fall down pretty hard once you start working. It's going to be quite a crash to be confronted with reality. Like, but we'll see how it works. We'll see how it works for this generation. I hope that it works well, but that's why people are so. I recently had a discussion with a psychologist about that in the research. It was like 50 years ago, you had two personas. You went outside of your home and you were someone else. You put on your clothes as a uniform, as a mask, and you were someone else for your colleagues, for the outside world, for the cafe, for the barber. Then you were at home. At home, you came back and you took off the mask. You took off the clothes and you were you. Nowadays, people want to go out into the world and be themselves. And then that's where the psychological issue for some seem, that's what the research said, comes. You go out into the world wanting to be yourself, and then you're not acknowledged as yourself. So you start to have issues with your self-image. This is something prior generations didn't have because they were not themselves in public. They knew, I'm putting on the mask. I don't expect anyone at work to care about me. My colleague is not supposed to care about me as a human. I'm just a cog in the machine at work, nothing else. I'll be polite. Maybe I get someone to eat lunch with, and we're going to be on that very shallow social, relationship level. And nowadays, people feel like, oh, my coworkers don't acknowledge me as a person. I feel neglected at that workspace. And so there are huge and interesting conflict zones created right now. So it was really interesting to dive into the psychological aspect of that too, really.
So you have talked a lot about gap 3.
Okay.
Good job.
Yeah.
Now let me tell you about gap 4. That's the only one left.
Okay. Oh,
There's a
man.
gap between what people do and what the organization says is going to happen. That's
Okay.
the communication gap.
Okay.
So if the organization says everybody at our place is going to be friendly,
Yeah.
and instead they're not, that's a gap.
Yeah.
So
That's such an issue because for the viewers that don't know, for example, why McDonald's or other chains are so successful, psychologically, most people tend to prefer, we don't care about the benefit. Most people don't want to have a negative experience. That means if I go to McDonald's, for example, it's always the same. I know what
yes,
to expect. I know it's not the best burger, but I know what to expect.
yes,
And if I go there and it's like is it bad or not? Do I get something that's messed up? Even if it's just one of 10 times, I won't go there anymore. I will experience it once or twice and then I won't go there anymore. So what you say is really important. It's that one that one rude person in the company that greets the one entering in a rude way, or is the rude cashier, or like the call center agent that's rude, represents the whole company. And if I experience one or twice that there was something negative, I will tell all of the people that I know, this company is bad, don't work with them. So it's really, really tough to set up these procedures and standards, as you said. It's really,
But
yeah,
think Disney.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
those who are adults might not, think Disney's all that sexy,
yeah,
but you go to Disney, you get
mm,
the same thing.
yeah. Well,
The
at least for a
children,
long, long time, it was like that. As far as I heard, I'm not too experienced. They shifted slightly in the last like 5 to 10 years, or is that wrong? With the experience in the parks and everything, as far as I heard.
no. Now
Okay.
Disney Europe, Disney France is
Yeah.
different
Ah. Okay. Okay.
because
Okay.
Disney France,
Yeah.
people in France don't like workers in France
Yeah.
don't like to be told what to do.
Okay. Okay.
Disney Hong Kong's great. Disney in
Okay.
the US, superb.
Okay. Okay. So you think there are also regional differences in for companies, how easy it is to enforce these standards and these procedures?
Well, we do know that when Disney went to France, they had a lot of trouble. And the trouble was in with the workers, trying to get the workers to smile on cue and, because people felt like, I don't want to do that.
Mhm. Okay. And you can't just say, okay, we don't hire these kind of people. We you don't do it, you get fired. We're gonna take someone else. Didn't work out.
You can try.
Okay.
So what they did actually,
Yeah.
when it opened, they took a whole lot of people from the US and put them into that.
Yeah. Wow.
And but when they tried to hire locally, it wasn't quite as easy.
Okay.
Some of your viewers are not going to like what I say, are they?
And
If you're
they're not
French.
gonna like a few of the things that I said either. Let's be honest. That's the important thing. I'm not doing this to be liked by as many people as possible. I want to give value to the people who want to be successful, who are curious, who want to learn stuff. And sometimes you gotta tell unpleasant truths. That's just part of the game. I'm gonna be honest. It's like I'm in consulting. I often work with companies. I often work with clients. And one of the things that I myself, as a brand, so to speak, have developed was I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff. I'm not going to come to you and say, oh, you're all so awesome. And hey, your feelings and everybody's valued. I'm going to come and say, well, this is, bullshit. And this is a waste of time and energy. And this person or this person has to be fired because they're not good enough. That's just the way it is. You can't be successful without being honest. I mean, on the other side, I also think you don't have to be a jerk. Some people misunderstand and mistake the being honest and being factual with being rude. No, I don't like that. I
Yes.
think I think you can be polite. I think you can have all the manners that you need. You don't need to insult anyone. People are different. I understand that different people have different goals. That's also absolutely fine. You're not wrong because you're looking for something else. But sometimes stuff will contradict each other. As you said, for example, with the do you want to have responsibility? Do you want to be part of something where you think you have impact? If you want to have impact, you will have to have responsibility. And if you want responsibility, you won't have freedom. Those two things are contradicting each other. You can't be free and responsible for something big and valuable. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
So it's always a trade off. And here on this channel, I want to be honest and give people value and information. And the trade off is sometimes hurting some feelings. And I'm fine with that.
Okay. But I don't like to hurt clients' feelings.
Mm.
I like to find other ways to deal with clients' feelings.
Then tell me a bit, how do you handle situations where it's like, oh man, I gotta say something negative. I just have to tell them this does not work what they're doing, or this is not the right path to success for them. And then you have someone who's emotionally invested into this situation, because as you know, in big corporations, sometimes there were fights for 1 or 2 years inside politics to get to this solution, and someone is really, really invested into them. And if that solution is not used, they might lose their position, all of their political weight they have in these corporations. Maybe their whole career is on danger. So how do you
Okay, I'll give you 2 examples. One is one-on-one. Another one is at the whole organization level, okay? One-on-one, the most important thing is to listen. I see. I see your point. I understand that what you really think is right is this. You're not promising anything. I mean, that's what airlines stewardesses and stewards do when all the things are wrong with the airline. And that's what they should do. Now, if you're talking about from a whole corporate point of view, we call it the customer pyramid. And we have a paper on that. And it's that you sort your customers into, at the top are your platinum customers, then your gold customers, then your silver customers, then your lead customers. Lead customers are those who every time they interact with you, they're costing you money. You have to find a way to interact with them that doesn't cost you money. Online. Send them online.
like to contact form and so on and so on, or what? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a platinum customer. This is a little bit like airline stuff, but a little bit more. Okay. I'm a platinum customer of American Express. I have my own telephone number that I can reach their contact center if I have anything I need. All the other levels can't do that. But I pay $900 a year to have that.
Okay. Okay. I I gotta ask you, because you mentioned something, and I know we don't have that much time, sadly, because you're really interesting to talk to you. I've had a lot of fun, pleasure talking with you. But you said something that I want just to focus a bit on before we have to quit: the aspect of online. A lot of what we discussed was general general experiences that were valued and applied for centuries, you could say. The game has changed, or would you say the game has changed or not, ever since its social media landscape, with the more data driven, with more, it's easier to get feedback from the customers nowadays. It's easier to get like what they like, how they interacted with the page. Do you think there has been anything that's really changed the game, or is it still the same game and it's just a few other tools that were added? Or what do
Oh,
you
it's changed the game immensely.
Okay. In what ways do you think?
Well, you can get immediate feedback from your customers. When I'm online with Facebook, Instagram, I don't use Twitter, but if I have looked up a piece of clothing from a site, next time I get on Facebook, that piece of clothing is right there. Okay. Or same thing with a service. I mean, there are immense differences. And people tried to use ServQual to measure that stuff. And we said, ServQual is not the right thing. That's why we came up with ESQual, electronic service quality. It's a different measure.
What are the what would you say? How could you explain to a layman what the differences are, like in general?
Most important thing online is efficiency, getting to the place you want to get to fast, and privacy. The most important thing in a in ServQual is reliability, doing what you said you're going to do.
Okay. Really interesting. Reliability in the ServQual, and privacy and efficiency in the online spaces. That's an interesting mix. That's really an interesting mix. Because I personally had the experience back in the days from when I was young. As I said, I had many different jobs, from construction work to restaurants to anything that could pay. And I remember I worked for a little restaurant that went somewhat well. And the boss there was like, we don't put, how do you say, these little servietten?
Napkins?
Napkins. Thank you very much. Yeah. Like, we don't put these little napkins on the places. And I said, why not? It looks nice. Because the customer doesn't pay it. Each thing that the customer wants, that the guest wants, every little thing is a price on it. If the customer is ready to pay $5 more for it, then we do that. And I think it ties nicely into what you said. Well, you're willing to pay those 900 extra for the American Express to get that number. Are you willing to pay that extra on the Marriott hotel? It costs more than the cheapest Airbnb, but you get another experience for it. So as a service provider, should I maybe, like, how important is it to watch out in what budget area you are? Maybe just for the people who listen to this. What are you able to deliver to make yourself stand out and to be better and to give the customer the best experience that they want while staying in that, how should I say it, in that price bracket that they are willing to pay? And that's really
Well,
interesting, the quality and the gap
you know,
that you, yeah.
in the United States, you have to give people napkins
Okay.
because
But
if you don't, they're going to spill all over themselves. They're going to drip all over
yeah.
themselves.
No. Yeah, of course. I didn't mean it like that. I mean this. You like origami. You can make these napkins really looking
I
cute,
see.
nice, and
Yeah,
everything. You
you were
just
doing too
back there, you
much.
go on the space, and that's
You
it.
were doing too much.
Yeah,
Yeah, price is a whole other topic.
yeah,
Price is part of gap form, but we're almost out of time. You'll have to
yeah.
call me again, and we'll talk again.
I would love to. I would love to. You're awesome to talk to. As again, for the viewers, I will link below a few of the papers of the books. There are many books she wrote that are awesome together with other people. I think it's absolutely worth it to take a look into it, really. No matter what industry you're in. I mean, of course, no matter what industry, if you're in the service industry, of course. But like in the service industries, there are many different fields where I think looking up that research, to consider it, to really put it into the business plan and to reflect upon it can be of immense value to many of you. Guys, with that, I think we're finished. Valarie, it was a great pleasure to talk to you. I thank you very much for the time you took. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I wish you and your family just the very best. Thank you very much for having been
Thank
here on
you.
the show.